This program deals with themes of an adult nature and is intended for a mature audience.
If you like what you watch, then don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Twitter for the latest updates on the KTPF Community Talk Show. Remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel for our new weekly radio shows. To accompany the KTPF Community Talk Show, we now have our own free magazine to view online or download for free. Visit our website for more details. Also, the KTPF Community Talk Show is supported by Phenomenon Magazine and Beyond Parazine, available online now. The comments and views expressed on the KTPF Community Talk Show are those of the people that make them and do not necessarily reflect the views of ourselves or of our sponsors.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
They've landed.
You're in the right place. Online, on the web, and on air. All over the world.
Talk Radio.
You hear us, we hear you.
Yeah, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of the KTPF Community Talk Show live and uncensored from Manchester on www.ktpf.co.uk. Broadcasting on KTPF Radio, Worsley Radio and DM Radio in New Jersey, USA. My name is Suzanne.
And I'm Steve.
And over in Essex we have our regular co-host, parapsychologist and historian, Mr. Andy Mercer. Good evening, Andy.
Hello, how's things up there?
Yeah, not too bad.
I nearly wasn't here.
Why was you not in here?
I went out to unload the car, and God in his infinite wisdom decided to pelt me with bloody hailstones. And they hurt. I got little red dots on top of me on my ball patch.
I got soaked here as well. We're doing some cleaning out and went to take some stuff down the tip, and we just managed to get back in time before the sky fell down. It did rain a bit while we were out. We weren't gone for long, but it's been quite rough here. We've actually lost a bit of the back of our house we have repaired. The wind got underneath and pulled some boarding off, so having a good time at the moment.
Okay. Well, we've finally got DM Radio and Worsley Radio connected with us now. We had a bit of a problem with the encoder there. So welcome to you guys listening in. Now, just to let you know, we are here keeping the paranormal friendly. So pull up a chair, relax with us while we bring you a show full of the supernatural, the paranormal and other strange phenomena. You can join us in our chat room, which is on our website at www.ktpf.co.uk, which you can connect via Facebook, Twitter, Google, Yahoo, or even register with Chatwing yourself. And we have some people already in the chat room, so hello to you, including Richard Clements. And Andy's in there if you ever need to ask him any questions.
Yeah, we interrupted Andy's listening, didn't we?
Richard's listening, yeah. Yes, when we was testing it, so... I
hope he managed to get back to the good bit he was waiting for.
I don't know, he might have passed that actually. Just to let you know about what's happening tonight, we were supposed to have Poetra Celebrius, if that's how you pronounce his name, on the show, but unfortunately, due to the Easter period, he is otherwise engaged and he's had to cancel. So unfortunately, we will not be talking about UFOs in Poland tonight. So
unless, of course, Andy's been investigating and he's got something for us there.
Well,
Can't do a Polish accent. No, I'm afraid not. We have a backup plan, as always. Whenever there's a show that loses its guest, I usually come up with something. And tonight, I've got a little list of 10 conspiracies that came true. Conspiracy theories that were at the time believed to be nonsense and unbelievable, that were actually proven to be absolutely true. More than enough evidence has emerged to show each one of these 10 conspiracies is absolutely genuine and is real. So tonight's top 10 conspiracies that are true, but we'll do that a bit later.
Yes, okay. That will be after our next section, which is over to Steve for his observations.
Oh, you did that just just been gulping down some coffee and...
Chocolate.
No, the chocolate was before that, but it took some breath down with it and made me burp, so I do apologise. Okay. This mystery iridescent cloud fell from the sky just above the stations of the cross parade in Yogo, Nayarit, Mexico. Do you think it's another sign of the end of the times unfolding in front of your eyes? Or a sign of the man himself over the Easter period commemorating the death of the man that has become known as his son? Well, it would be nice, but unfortunately it's more likely to be light refraction from water crystals in the sky, in the clouds. I'm sure Mr. Mercer would agree there. What about our friends on the chat room?
Yeah, I would certainly agree. Fabulous to see something like that. I mean, occasionally you can actually catch that in our own skies that they call the second sun, where you get a kind of little bright patch, appears to be like a reflection in the clouds, and it's often, if you look through sunglasses, you'll see there's a rainbow-like effect in it. But yeah, definitely ice crystals, but it's an impressive sight, certainly.
Yeah, they do look good, don't they? And I mean, the way, the timing of it happening made it really good, because it's over the Easter parade and the period and everything, you know.
Definitely.
Harky-dirky then. Let me bring
That
up...
was a short one.
It was. I've got some short ones, but I do have a long one at the end. Don't worry, I do have a long one at the end.
Okay.
I don't want to know about your long one at the end.
Now.
Yes, it is.
Okay. This picture was taken by an unmanned game camera back in our woods in upstate New York, says Sue. Is that right, Sue?
Oh, it wasn't me.
Oh, it wasn't you. Okay. Check out the front foot and facial features. I'm not claiming this to be anything but curious. No one was back in the woods at the time. This was snapped by a camera mounted on a tree. Can you explain it? I'm not sure what the figure is in the image. It's so overexposed. Is this a natural artifact of the camera? Was the answer. At a certain time of day, it makes the figure look ghost-like, as if leaving the creature. It does not look like a bear, and certainly not like a deer. It does look like an upright walking creature. It's possibly that someone was walking around out there. Maybe a Bigfoot. There's not enough detail in the photo, obviously, to make a determination. But I agree, it is curious.
It's like a little old man going for a stroll in the woods.
It probably is, but it does make for a curious picture, as there's no actual detail of him.
He's wearing a tin-foil suit, from the looks of him.
I can only assume at that time the sun decided to shine directly on the lens.
Yeah, definitely.
And cause a bit of a goo-goo.
Certainly odd.
There's a little bit of cryptozoology for you now. Here we go. Oh, hang on, I didn't post that bit. I just put it in there. There we go. This strange creature may be the reality behind the unicorn myth. One is cute, pink-maned horse with ambiguous sexuality, with rumoured to fart clouds of sweet glitter, and the other is a 15-foot Siberian rhino. Scientists now believe that the Siberian rhino, Alas motherium sibericum, might have been around far longer than scientists previously believed, surviving until a mere 26,000 years ago.
That's a horn and a half, isn't it?
Isn't it just? That would mean that the early humans might have seen the huge one-horned beast and created the myth of the unicorns. All the stuff about pink manes and glitter came along later, obviously. Researchers found a skull in Pavloda, Peretich region in Kazakhstan. And carbon dating showed the fossil was a little over 26,000 years old. Dr. Andrei Shabansky of Tomsk University said most likely the south and western Siberia was a refuge where the rhino preserved the longest in the comparison with the rest of its range. There is another possibility that it could migrate and dwell for a while in a more southern area. Most likely it was a very large male of very large individual age. So the dimension of this rhino are the biggest of those described in the literature, and the proportions are typical. Researchers believe that the climate in Siberia changed, leading many of the species to die out. But some may say, ha!
Indeed.
That is one big horn.
Well, it's certainly an obscure, not obscure, what's the word I'm looking for, a remote part of the world, Siberia, and all sorts of strange things could be lurking out there when there's hundreds of miles from the known communities. Anything could be hiding up there. So, yeah, could be those things still around up there now.
Well, maybe not now, but you never know, as you say. You never know.
Anything's possible.
Richard said, why would you have a horn that size of what? It is amazing when you think that all horn is hair.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's just solid hair.
Can you imagine how much hair that thing would have on its body if it wasn't in a horn? Very hairy indeed.
It would be a mammoth.
Indeed, yes. Oh, maybe that's what it is.
Aha. Right. He's not with us at this point, unfortunately, but this one came from Brendan Moss.
Oh, he's just about to come and join us.
He's just about to come and join us, is he?
Yeah, he was having trouble getting in the chat room, so I've just given him the other link.
We'll tell him I'm about to do his link that he sent me. Her dad says his 4-year-old daughter captured the moment a ghost sang along with her on camera while she sat on her bed.
Lovely.
David Garrett said he gave his cell phone to his daughter before he went to use the restroom, the Daily Mail reported. Garrett, who lives in his Toronto home alone with his daughter, said the video also captured something crawling at the bottom of this little girl's bed. The video was posted on YouTube and racked up more than 2,400 views before being removed. It was later re-uploaded by another user. In the original video description, Garrett wrote, "My 4-year-old daughter came and woke me up at 8 a.m. and I left the room to go to the bathroom and she took a video on my phone with some freaky shit on it. She is babbling as children do, and when she pauses you hear a male voice sing along with her and the blanket moves near the end. Also at the end the male voice says, 'You are so funny.' We live alone, it's just her and I. I have never had anything like this happen to me. My eyes water and the hair stands up on my arms when I watch this. It's actually the scariest thing I've ever had happen to me, but at least the spirit, or whatever it seems to be, is nice." The concerned father said he is taking no chances after capturing the alleged ghost on camera. He took his daughter to stay with his parents at their home and says he is terrified to return home. When he returned, he found a chilling video on his phone. Hello, why have you put that at the end, you silly persons? Nope, they've added that at the end. Shouldn't be there. I do apologise. So that is that. What do you think of that, guys?
Richard said it's been around a while. Must admit it's pretty good though.
It is. You can actually hear another voice there. Obviously, we can't see where he is, so we don't know whether it was actually him. That the voice, I mean, not the stuff moving on the bed. But it is quite a good one.
It's certainly strange. If it is as appears, then there's no doctoring or fiddling around or hoaxing. It is certainly quite interesting. Yeah, definitely.
Right. This next one is it's a little bit long, but I do not apologise because there's more to the story even after I've said my bit. And I know Andy is going to say to some of it at least, "What a load of codswallop."
There's a possibility. I think I know it's coming.
But I don't care. I'm doing it anyway.
Go for it.
Here we go. Nazi boffins were developing flying saucers. A conspiracy theorists are convinced Hitler stashed them in the Antarctic. Yes, under the snow. Hitler's Nazi regime created a mind-bending arsenal of super advanced but unbelievably bizarre Wunderwaffe. Or miracle weapons.
Yes.
In the death throes of World War II, the Luftwaffe will build an increasingly wacky aircraft, some shaped like disc or with circular wings. The US Force Probe concluded these experiments flying machines may be to blame for UFO sightings. UFO hunters go further and insist they still lie hidden in an underground base at the South Pole. Oh, has to be the South Pole because everybody's been to the North Pole, haven't they? This all may sound ridiculously far-fetched until you see the fantastic aircraft Nazi Germany really was making towards the end of the war. If you scroll down, you will see some of the pictures there. This all may sound... Here we go. In a fit of terrifying creativity, Nazi scientists created the world's first cruise missile, the first long-range... Oi! You hear that?
There's a dog in the studio.
There is, and she wants to shut up, or I will send her on the rocket. Right, where was it? Oh, yes. The first long-range ballistic missile, the first artificial object to reach space, one of the first military helicopters, a space shuttle, and started developing nuclear weapons. Now this, they all know for a fact. Okay, this bit, that bit. British aeronautical engineer Roy Fedden, who led a mission to examine German expertise and research at the end of World War II, said that I have seen enough of their designs and production plans to realise that if they had managed to prolong the war some months longer, we would have been confronted with a set of entirely new and deadly developments in air warfare. But some of the lesser known plans bear striking resemblance to flying saucers. Brothers Reimer and Walter Houghton built the world's first jet-powered flying wing, an aircraft without tail or fuselage. The Houghton Ho 229 was designed to answer Luftwaffe boss Hermann Göring's call for bomber designs capable of meeting a 3 times 1,000 requirement to carry 1,000 kilograms of bombs, a distance of 1,000 kilometers, at a speed of 1,000 kilometers per hour. The US military seized the last Houghton prototype as part of Operation Paperclip, which I think you know about, Andy.
That is indeed one of the ones I'll be talking about in
Yes.
much greater detail later on.
A secret mission to capture advanced Germany weapons research to keep it out of Soviet hands. Their design mysteriously reappeared as the revolutionary B-2 stealth bomber. Eugen Sanger and Arjen Brent designed the Silbervogel space line. For 1942 America bomber mission to attack the mainland US. Suborbital bomber, the precursor to the space shuttle, will be shot into space with a rocket booster and then bounce off the atmosphere. The Arado E555 was another flying wing design put forward by America bomber mission. They spell it funny, believe it or not. But perhaps the most revolutionary and most mystifying Nazi UFO was Victor Schussberg repulsine engine. The Austrian inventor developed a round turbine engine that could create a vortex and rise straight upwards. The SS captured Schuberger and made him try to turn the engine into a vertical takeoff aircraft which looked exactly like a flying saucer. The prototype crashed, but the research was said to be continued by a shadowy V2 rocket engineer called Dr. Heinrich Richard Merz. I just had a thought. I just had a thought.
You didn't hear the next line out.
I just read the last line.
No, nothing to do with it. The next line is that bit about when the Americans captured him and tried to make him reproduce it. Could that have been what Roswell really was?
Well, it's certainly a possibility. I mean, we've talked about it previously, but
Yes.
my personal feeling is that's exactly what Roswell was,
Yeah.
experimental potential aircraft or spacecraft that crashed.
I'll come back to it in a minute. Merz, whose existence has never been conclusively proved, was said to have worked on several Flugscheiben or flight discs designed during the early 1940s. The most notorious of these designs was the fabled V7, which supposedly harnessed high-intensity electricity charges to turn the oxygen in the air into an endless fuel supply. No photographs of the V7 survived, but after the war, German engineer Bernhard Schwentet patented the flying saucer design he claimed was actually constructed during the war. The Soviets are said to have seized the V7 prototype when they marched into Breslau Air Base in West Germany. Now, Wrocław, Poland. So, and that is me.
Right. Okay.
So
That was Mandy.
Yeah, no, I heard that.
hello, Mandy. Yeah, when he said about they made him reproduce it and it crashed, I instantly thought of Roswell. Maybe that was the case.
I would absolutely agree. I think the most likely explanation for a Roswell, it was a secret research facility that was testing possibly spacecraft, space vehicles, or a new design of jet that crashed. I think that's probably the more likely, because I know it's not one of the ones I covered in the list of 10, but we know that the CIA certainly use UFO stories and cases to mask and hide its very genuine research work it was involved in. And they would actually promote stories of UFOs to hide what they've been up to in terms of research and development, things that may have gone wrong. So I think that's entirely possible. That's the explanation for Roswell. But
yeah, I mean, we do know that the superpowers that be at the time captured a lot of, I will say, German scientists, not Nazi, because a lot of them weren't. Mm-hmm. They were just doing what they were told or consequences. And
choice.
Yeah.
They had no choice but to act and do what they were doing.
And if that's the case, then they could quite easily have reproduced their experiments for the superpowers that be.
Indeed.
And if you are interested in looking at the secret poo fetish of Adolf Hitler, there is a link there for you.
Maybe we should leave that aside.
Some of the things people put on Facebook.
The other thing that's there is that they weren't far from getting their first nuclear weapon.
Well,
which, if you think about it, both America and Russia both seemed to get quite quickly after the war. Did they not? And obviously, when I say quick, that's comparative, because it takes a long time to put everything in place that you need, obviously. So I just said sorry about the spoiler, Andy.
Yeah, because he was saying about the conspiracy theory about there was an Operation Paperclip launched by the Americans in 1948, and he believes to do battle with the Nazis who had fled to Antarctica, which Andy's put that he's going to be talking about Paperclip later.
And it's quite interesting that Richard and me both mentioned Paperclip.
Yes. So,
spooky.
All good fun. Right, okay.
As I say, that is me.
That is you, Dundee.
That is you. A few of you may have seen the FB page where I've posted loads of stuff that was either too long or I didn't think I could cover tonight.
Yes. So there are a few on there if you want to have a look.
Like the alien village.
Right. Okie dokie. So, thank you for that, Steve.
You're welcome.
Very nice of you to what's the name. If you've just joined us, note that our regular, our scheduled guest, Poetra Celebius, is not with us tonight.
Just call him Peter.
Otherwise known as Peter. He's not with us tonight because, unfortunately, I don't think he realised this weekend was Easter and he had other plans made. So he let us know yesterday, so we had to put a show together quite quickly, which Andy has sorted out for us.
Successfully done.
Yeah, it's come to the rescue.
Yes. And as for the Peter, both me and Andy should know that it's Peter, because we both had...
It is Peter, because I was going to ask him if I could call him Peter.
Because we both had a football player of the same name.
Don't start going to football.
A rather good goalkeeper.
Don't start going to football.
Well, I can't stop. I've got to say this. I have to say I've never known England to win both an international cricket match and a football match on the same day.
Yeah, they normally don't, do they?
Could that be a conspiracy?
Yes,
I don't know.
Yes.
Conspiracy of light, as they like to call it.
It definitely could, because they never seem to both win at the same time.
No, I've noticed, I've genuinely noticed over the years, and it is just coincidence, I know, but whenever England win cricket, Arsenal lose a football match. If England lose a cricket, Arsenal win a football match. Time and time again, that's happened. But to see England win both competitions and beat the Germans...
That means Arsenal's in dead trouble.
Oh, I know, absolutely. We're doomed. Well,
They both won.
Get rid of Wenger out, I say. Anyway, that's another story. That's not one of my conspiracies. But before I tell you about the conspiracies I've been doing a little bit of research on, I've got to tell you guys, I mentioned it briefly, obviously, in a message during the week, but something that happened here in my humble house only a few days ago.
Yes.
Absolutely genuine, totally happened. It was really quite bizarre. Mandy and I were sitting watching TV. I'm sort of sprawled out in the armchair, often fiddling about on the laptop, and she sits in I'm sitting on the settee rather. She sits in the armchair, and there's a gap between us, and we have basically it's like an ornamental box thing as a table that sort of sits between the two of us, kind of at an angle. So they're sitting there, and all of a sudden, I actually saw it. Mandy heard it, and I don't know if it was. Literally, a piece of paper just appeared from nowhere in the space between the two of us. Hit the box, bounced off, and fell on the floor. And it was like, what the hell? Where did that come from? You know, she heard the noise and kind of caught a glimpse of it, but I actually saw it. It was in my eye line, flash in front of me, and bounced off the box and hit the floor.
Can I clarify that it was it a screwed up piece of paper or flat or what?
Oh, no, it's a screwed up piece of paper. I picked it up. It was a receipt for some books I'd bought about a week ago. Oddly enough, books on ghosts. So
Somebody's trying to get your attention.
Yeah, read.
Well, we do think so.
They were probably telling you to read the damn books.
Yeah.
Well, funny enough, I was actually working on one of them. I'm doing research about compiling stuff for my next book, which is on curses and spells. So it was almost tied in, but it was like, that's pretty strange. And I mean, we've had odd things happen before that you could possibly explain, but that one, there was no explanation at all. It literally just appeared. It would have been between the two of us, thrown across to bounce off the box table thing and land on the floor. It was very, very strange.
Direction, was it from behind, in front, sideways?
Beside us, between us rather.
No, I mean, what direction did the paper come from?
In the middle of the room.
So it was thrown towards you.
Well, no, it was thrown onto the box. If you imagine, actually think about the way you two are set up. You're one side, Steve, and Sue's the other side, and you've got a space between the two of you. If you imagine my lounge, you have the settees by the door. It would be to your immediate right, spread out across. It's standing at the door. Directly in front of you would be the armchair Mandy's sitting in, and there's a gap between the two of us. The TV is in the opposite corner to the gap, and it went across from the gap to the box that was in the middle of the room, bounced off that and hit the floor. Yeah, it was within about 2 or 3 feet of each of us, between us.
What I mean is, from where it finished up, could you tell whether it came from the middle of the room towards you and hit the box?
It would probably have come from the doorway, but there's absolutely nobody else in the house. Right. Definite.
Yeah, I was just trying to get which kind of direction it would have come from.
Yeah, it would have been coming from the doorway, more or less, to have hit the box to bounce between us, kind of a bit towards the middle of the room. But yeah, it certainly was. It wasn't like from the side or from a wall direction. It was just literally, what the hell did that come from? We just sort of looked at each other and laughed, like, what on earth? Yeah, there's no doubt about it. That was pretty strange. I don't know where the receipt was only a week old. It wasn't some ancient one from God knows when. It wasn't thrown by the guinea pigs because they were in a different part of the room, so it was just a complete mystery.
Was it warm when you picked it up?
Well, funny enough, that's why I always feel for, if you like, anything like that, because more often than not, when I've experienced it on actual investigations, usually it's unusually warm. So I expected it to be, but it wasn't. It was just room temperature, ambient temperature. But then paper, it's harder to tell. If it's a piece of stone or something or metal, it's much more obvious, isn't it, if it's actually warmer or colder because of the density of the material. But this, you couldn't really tell. It was just odd, basically, just very odd.
Do you have a recollection of where the receipt was beforehand?
I couldn't tell you. I honestly couldn't tell you. It was it was only from not last weekend, the weekend before.
But would you have screwed it up? Is that?
Oh yeah, very likely.
Is that what you do? You screw them up?
I'd sort of be stuffed in your pocket somewhere or with a bag. I expect something like that. So where it came from, I couldn't even begin to tell you.
Okay.
Interesting.
Wouldn't have known. It was very odd. It was very,
Yes.
I've done ghost investigations, obviously, and I do sense stuff on events, as I've mentioned many times. There was no sense of anything being here in this house. It was just very strange.
Yeah.
I have a feeling it's a family member.
Blimey.
Yes.
There could be Mandy's mum. She's always annoying us.
Right. On the subject of ghosts, investigations actually. We was out last night at a new investigation at Weir Mill in Stockport, which is basically on the bank of the River Mersey there. It started around 1790 and added to it, particularly in 1831 and 1884.
So that's a long investigation.
Hold on, I'm telling you about the building. In 1840, the Stockport Viaduct was built over the river and over Weir Mill. Now, the original water-powered Weir Mill was built on the southern bank of River Mersey, 500 metres from its source at the confluence of the River Tame and the River Goyt, the turnpike to Manchester, with 200 metres to the east. The history, the fact that it was the first record of a mill on this site was when John Collier, of cotton manufacturer, built a mill on the site in 1790, which was water-powered. The mill probably consisted of 2 multi-storey spinning mills and attached weaving sheds. One was destroyed by fire in 1831 and the other rebuilt in 1884. Thomas Fernley built the mill in 1824 and in 1831 needed to replace one mill with a new one that was of fireproof construction. The mill was 11 bays long and 6 stories high, and the floors were sprung on transverse brick arches supported on cast iron columns. It was driven by a beam engine in an internal engine house to the east of the mill. It was over the engine house that the Manchester and Birmingham Railway built the Stockport Viaduct in 1840. And again, when it widened in 1880, the second mill was replaced in 1884, but not the original warehouse. It is 5 stories high, 15 bay mill of fireproof construction with narrow longitudinal vaults springing from iron joints, and the original weaving sheds had been replaced with 2-story structures complete with complex sites. Now, it's got 10 floors, but unfortunately we didn't have all levels yesterday, did we?
No, the weird thing is, with it being built of a fireproof construction, it is actually the fire brigade and health and safety that are saying they have to do some work on some of it, so we can't use it.
Yes, unfortunately.
But
so we had 3 areas last night.
Having said that, the areas we did have, every group got something.
Yes.
There was something going on all the way through.
Yeah.
In some of it is obviously used for airsoft.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got some construction. The first room that I was in, they called the tyre room for obvious reasons. Pitch black, tyres stacked everywhere, like a chicane area for people fighting. It was over by an outside wall, which should have been cold and it wasn't. One area in particular, the temperature on the floor was actually going up. And you could actually feel the vortex there, and we contacted a young girl there called Izzy in that particular area. There were other things picked up in there, actually some nurses. There was there was a man over in the area that they call the jail. The jail was obviously part of the airsoft bit, but I definitely saw him while we was doing an opening thing. Mm-hmm. Up in the I'll skip the box room because I can't remember what I particularly got there. But in the tree room, we did a little experiment. You know, we all get in a circle, we all face the inside, and one of our guests, a good friend of ours who's been on a lot of Invest, says, "Let's do it the other way." So we all turn around with our backs to the circle, the backs to the middle, and it did actually work. We were getting quite a bit of stuff from that. We were getting knock-ins and we could feel pressure and stuff. We asked if they wanted us to go to a different area, and they banged, and it sounded like 2 different bangs from 2 different areas.
Yeah.
So we split up and went to those areas. There was, I can't tell you what they got, but they had somebody that was messing with them and messing with the REM pod. Mm-hmm. Which actually went off in every single room last night.
Well, that was good then.
But
aside from the reconstruction areas that we couldn't get into, it was a good night.
It was a good night. I saw this shadowy image and I realised it was a child, and I openly said, loudly, not in my head, just openly said, "You want to come and hold my hand?" And she did.
Oh, blimey.
She actually I could actually feel. She didn't actually hold my hand, but I could feel the pressure on my fingers. You know, like a very young child would.
Yeah.
She could actually feel the pressure on my fingers, and my whole hand went warm in what was a cold building. And I walked her back towards the area where she was, and when we got to the area where I first saw her, gone.
She disappeared.
No longer holding my hand.
Blimey.
And I mean, it wasn't just a feeling I got that she was holding my hand. I actually felt the pressure on my fingers,
Yeah.
which was good.
Excellent.
And one of our guests who was a first timer,
Yeah.
I actually got her to put her hands up and bring her hands down
Feel the essence.
and to feel the essence of the child. She actually got the shape of the child.
Blimey. Well, that's pretty impressive, to say the
So
least.
that was good. And every group seemed to get something in one of the rooms.
So it wasn't a bad night, actually.
So it was good. It just makes you wonder what we would have got if we'd had the other areas to go into.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know.
What did we miss because things need to be updated on the floors and stuff?
Yeah. This is it. So
Can't wait till they open the rest of it up.
this
Again.
is it. Yeah. So, but it wasn't a bad night, actually.
No, very enjoyable.
So I sat in the hub all night. Me being me.
Yes, and they put the tea and coffee on for you, and they even do hot dogs.
Hot dogs.
Really?
Yeah, they go the little machine there with the water and the hot dogs and the onions and everything in for you.
Yeah.
Obviously, they serve you and serve you $1.25 a hot dog,
Yeah. Really good it was.
and it was a good night
So shattered afterwards though.
as usual.
Sure.
I don't know.
And of course, on top of that, towards the end of our investigation, the clocks went forward.
Oh, yeah. It's robbed of an hour.
That made it even worse for us.
Yeah.
We actually finished on what would have been 3 o'clock, and obviously it was actually 4. So by the time we got home, it was 4:30.
Yeah.
By the time we'd got everything sorted and had a drink, it was nearly 5 o'clock again.
I'm rather interestingly just changing the subject very slightly there with the change of time. It's only relatively recently that it's become 2 o'clock has been the time designated for the clocks to move.
Yeah,
Until fairly recently, it was still only 12 o'clock. But when it was first set up during the times of the First World Wars, when it all first came in, of course, we'd all be tucked up in bed at midnight, so there was no point worrying about it then. But now, modern life is as it is, they've had to move it forward 2 hours because of a lot of us are still awake that time of the night. I know I always am. I'm rarely in bed before 1 o'clock.
Yeah, same here. We're rarely tucked up in bed before 1.
Yeah, so it's a bit strange to see you have to adjust your clocks and you're wide awake watching it happening. So if we sit there last night just watching a bit of TV and suddenly you notice, oh, my laptop's changed. Oh, the phone's changed. Oh, of course, yeah. They do it for themselves now, which is quite
Yeah,
useful.
it's even stranger when you look at your phone and you go, it's after 12, and next time you look at it, it's 3 o'clock. You're what?
Yeah, well, there.
Where did that go?
I don't know.
It's so it still makes me wonder whether it's worth actually doing it in the first place.
Oh, I agree. I think it just makes a nonsense of time, really. Let's just settle on one or the other and leave it at that. I absolutely agree.
I think I can understand the original reason for it,
Oh, yeah.
but I think it's outdated now. It needs to be stopped and go one way or t'other.
Yeah.
Well, I say it was around the time of the First World War. It was aimed and allowed more hours of work in the evening, of course, when
Yeah, it was.
they're more reliant on natural light.
It was for the farmers and that, wasn't it?
Yeah, and these
initially.
days, of course, it really doesn't matter. Natural light's not so important to the vast majority of us because we have artificial light. But yeah, it's like when I was saying to someone in the week, we still stick very much to the 9 to 5 routine, which we really don't need to do anymore because you can carry on long into long beyond 5 p.m. doing stuff, and there's no reason to have to get up so early to get ready for 9 o'clock. But these old habits die hard, as they say.
This
True.
is it.
True.
So,
What do you have for us, Mr. Mercer?
yeah.
Okay, yes. On a sort of a bit of a whim, really, you came up with this little idea. We've done a top 10 conspiracies before that can cause a bit of mayhem, actually. So I thought we'd stick with something a little safer this time.
Yeah.
These are top 10 conspiracies that actually proved to be true. Now, when I say true, there's insurmountable evidence that these things definitely happened the way that the conspiracy theories claim they did. It's multiple sources have verified these things are true. So this is what we have.
Do you have links for us, Mr. Bursa?
Say again?
Do you have links for us?
I don't know, but I can just tell you them, and we can always put something into a search if you wanted to. It's really just a bit like we do if we had a guest come on. I've just sort of typed the stuff up earlier on today. So
Richard Clements has just posted, said during World War II they put the clocks forward 2 hours.
Well, apparently there was something about that at some point. I know there was something along those lines. So yeah, quite possibly.
That was to confuse the Germans.
Yeah.
That's so we wouldn't have the lights on in our chip shop, so they couldn't bomb.
Yeah.
Yeah. Confuse the fuzzy wuzzies.
Absolutely. Hey, well. Okay.
Mr. Madrid!
One of my favourite TV shows and radio shows. I've got the audio version of that as well, Dad. I absolutely love it. I haven't seen the new film recently. I haven't decided not to bother. I'm going to just wait till it comes out on DVD because I have very mixed feelings about when they start mucking about with classics like that. I think I'm not sure, so I'm going to wait and see what comes on DVD.
Okay, so what we've got number 10, the Operational Snow White. Is that where you're starting?
Yep, Operation Snow White. This is the Church of Scientology's infiltration of the government to steal information. Operation Snow White was the name given to an unprecedented infiltration of the US government by the Church of Scientology during the 1970s. They stole classified government files regarding Scientology from dozens of government agencies. In 1977, the FBI finally cracked Snow White open. That sounds rather painful. Which led to the arrest and imprisonment of senior church officials. The core mission of the program, this infiltration of government, was to expose and legally expunge, this is quotations, all false and secret files of the nations of the operations areas, and enable the church seniors and L. Ron Hubbard himself to frequent all Western nations without threat. By the end, of course, there was nothing legal about their endeavours. So effectively, the rumour was that this famous Church of Scientology, the Scientologists, of which, of course, what's his name now? Tom Cruise, probably one of the best known members, and John Travolta, basically broke into FBI files and other government agencies in order to try and remove anything that was incriminating or damning that was written about Scientology, to basically remove all such references. Yeah. They apparently were, they'd actually recruited some FBI police officers and government officials into the church itself and then coerced them by various means to take part in this illegal activity of stealing these files in order to try and make this church appear whiter than white.
I'm glad you said that, because earlier it sounded like Tom Cruise and John Travolta did it.
Oh, yeah, personally responsible. Well, you never know.
There's another conspiracy.
Oh, God, yeah. Well, this was mainly the 1970s when the church was growing at an exponential rate. Unfortunately, it was all very much part of the tail end of the counterculture movement, trying to move away from, obviously, conventional church and towards the Scientology, which was becoming more and more widespread. I mean, this, from what I can understand, this was limited mainly to America. But the suggestion, of course, is that perhaps other countries where there was a large number of Scientologists operating were also involved in perhaps places like the UK, for example. What do you think of that, guys?
Yeah, well, Richard Clements has said, "This doesn't surprise me. Scientology is constantly battling the establishment."
Well, it's one of those ones that you could read that two ways. Either Scientology has now fully integrated itself into the establishment and is trying to control it, or the other side of the coin is that it is probably the biggest single threat to the establishment, whatever the establishment is.
I don't really know what Scientology is.
Well, I can give you a quick little summarization. L. Ron Hubbard effectively had a joke with, I forget the guy's name. Oh, blimey. Funny enough, a guy who was actually involved in rocket development and research back in the 1960s. Follower of, Jack Parsons. I forget his name. Yeah, Jack Parsons. And another person that he could form his own religion. At the time, L. Ron Hubbard was a reasonably successful science fiction writer, but wanted to see if he could actually take it further and create a church or religion of his own. And Scientology was essentially that. Its belief system is a little strange. It might well be the origin for the idea that the world is controlled by reptile aliens, because as far as Hubbard's belief system was concerned, is that we are the product of ancient aliens visiting us. And as I've mentioned a few times before, the TV show Ancient Aliens is at least part funded by the Church of Scientology, because it's promoting their beliefs that we are, at the very least, a product of manipulation by aliens, if not aliens ourselves. So they could well be part of the reason why this idea of reptiles controlling the world has actually come to pass. I mean, it's mixed in with the ancient Anunnaki, which is from the Sumeria, the Sumerian gods and beings, but that's at least part of their belief system. But it's a lot of what you would definitely call mind control operations going on. There's this thing about clearing you of negative thought patterns by thinking certain ways and repeatedly thinking certain ideas and almost chanting them to yourselves until you believe them. So it's quite manipulative and controlling. Yeah. It's also very secretive. It's very hard to get a lot of real information about the church unless you become a member. And if you do, well, besides, if you ever tried to leave, I had a friend of mine at university. He went to my university long before I did. I didn't know him there, but he left before I went. He had a bit of a rough time at university for a while, and he actually got in contact with the Church of Scientology because he was actually approached by a member and was very briefly involved, and quickly decided it wasn't for him. And he had to eventually move house in London because they were bugging him so much. They were sending people round saying, why aren't you coming to your meetings? You bought these books for us, you haven't paid for them yet. And he said, well, as far as I knew, you were giving them to me. No, you bought them, you need to pay for them. Where's the money? And he had to change the phone line and move house eventually because they really did pursue him, which was the last thing he needed when he was suffering from a bit of depression at the time. So I've not had personal dealings with them. I know someone who certainly has had personal dealings. It wasn't very pleasant.
When it comes to the establishment, Richard Clements said, since the advent of the internet, Scientology seems to be losing the battle, thank God. And you were saying about the reptiles and stuff. Don't want to disperse the man, but it sounds a lot like what David Icke is coming up with, was coming up with. So are we to assume that maybe he may be a member?
I wouldn't have thought he was a member, certainly not, but I think one of the things we were saying last week when I was talking about him briefly, he does tend to grab hold of the latest thing and sort of run as far as he can with it. And as I say, there have been a number of organisations who have talked about this aliens being here, that there might be reptiles controlling us. So I doubt very much he's a member, but certainly I think he's well aware that part of the Scientology's approach to life is to include the possibility that these things are real, that there are ancient aliens who are here now as reptiles and controlling us. So along similar lines, I think is what we definitely say.
Right,
okay, so the next one. CIA.
Number 9, the CIA drug trafficking in Los Angeles. The theory itself was, the conspiracy theory was, that during the 1980s, the CIA facilitated the sale of cocaine to the Crips and the Bloods on the streets of Los Angeles, funneling millions of drug profits to a Latin American guerrilla army. It's convoluted and complex, but it's true. Just reading out from this bit I found online, Gary Webb's book, The Dark Alliance, CIA, the Contras and the Crack Cocaine Explosion, outlines how the CIA-backed Contras, this is in Nicaragua, these are the sort of right-of-centre anti-government army that was formed and fighting against the, I forget the name of them, in Nicaragua, basically this is what I was talking about. The Contras smuggled cocaine into the US and then distributed crack to Los Angeles gangs, pocketing the profits. The CIA directly aided the drug dealers to raise money for the Contras. This drug network, Webb wrote in 1996 in the San Jose Mercury News article, opened the first pipeline between Colombia's cocaine cartels and the black neighborhoods of Los Angeles, a city now known as the crack capital of the world. The cocaine that flooded the streets sparked a crack explosion in urban America, provided the cash and the connections needed for the LA's gangs to buy automatic weapons. It's also worth pointing out, on December the 10th, 2004, Webb, who first broke the story, committed suicide, but under rather suspicious circumstances. Namely, he used 2 bullets to shoot himself in the head. So he managed to fire the gun twice into his own head, which is pretty impressive, really, because you usually die pretty fast from a head wound. But yeah, so it looks like that is exactly the fact. The drugs explosion was mainly down to the CIA themselves, trying to find ways to illegally fund the Contras in the war in Nicaragua. Rather nasty.
Unfortunately, the likes of the CIA have a history of doing
Oh, absolutely,
rubbish like this.
absolutely. There was a film out back in the 90s called Air America. I think Mel Gibson was one of the stars of it.
Yes.
Which was talking about, which was one of the actual...
That was supposed to be a CIA thing, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. That was the CIA. Actually, one of their... it was supposed to be a commercial airline, but it was actually physically bringing the drugs in and out into America from Latin America, and it was obviously all about the adventures these guys are having. Adventures is a sort of an odd way of putting it, but basically that's what the film was about. But that was very much what they were up to.
Yeah, and unfortunately, they didn't learn their lessons either, did they?
Oh God, no, absolutely not. I
they're
think it's one of those
still
things.
doing
They're almost destined to make the same mistakes as the CIA. The next generation of people sort of come to the fore as the leadership, if you like, or the brains, shall we say, behind operations, and then old ideas get resurfaced, as you're going to see in a little while, actually.
Okay. So we got the next one. The Gulf of Tonkin incident
Mm-hmm.
never happened.
It never did indeed. Gulf of Tonkin incident is often cited as the number one reason why the US went to war in Vietnam. But the Gulf of Tonkin incident itself never actually occurred. It's true. The original incident, also sometimes referred to as the USS Maddox incident, involved the destroyer USS Maddox supposedly engaging 3 North Vietnamese Navy torpedo boats as part of an intelligence patrol. The Maddox fired almost 300 shells. President Lyndon Baines Johnson promptly drafted the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution, which became the administration's legal justification for military involvement in Vietnam. Problem is, the incident never happened. In 2005, a declassified internal NSA study revealed that there was no North Vietnamese naval vessels during the incident. So what was the Maddox firing at? In 1965, Johnson commented that, for all I know, our Navy was shooting at whales out there. So he even said it back as early as 1965. It's worth pointing out, though, that the NSA's own historian, Robert J. Hanoik, Hanoik, wrote a report stating that the agency had deliberately distorted intelligence reports in 1964. He concluded the parallels between the faulty intelligence in Gulf of Tonkin and the manipulated intelligence used to justify the Iraq War make it more worthwhile to re-examine events of August 1964. So how much do we know about what was really behind the Vietnam War? Well, I think the answer is fairly easy. Money. Lots of money.
Yeah.
Lots of money. Sorry, I'm losing it now. As was pointed out in the JFK film, the American military budget prior to the Vietnam War was 1/10 of what it was just 2 years later. So that was probably the number one reason. Also, there was the whole idea the CIA, good old CIA again, wanted to try and prove their argument of the domino theory to advance American involvement in other countries. Basically, the idea is if one country falls to communism, there'd be a whole chain of them. So if that happens, we have to be prepared to stop it. So how do you find if you can stop it? Well, you make it happen, and then you see what happens next, which was literally the argument. But that was basically, yes, a manipulation of a military event that never even took place. It's a little bit like the Germans claim that the Polish army invaded Germany at the start of World War II, rather, when in actual fact it was Nazi officers dressed up in Polish uniforms to try and fake the event. So these sort of things have gone out throughout history, I'm afraid. Which actually I'm going to jump in because this brings you very neatly to the number 7,
Yes.
which is the Nahariya testimony and the Gulf War. Nahariya al-Sabah is a 15-year-old Kuwaiti woman who testified to the US House of Representatives in 1990 that she had personally witnessed Iraqi soldiers invade Kuwait hospitals, take newborn infants out of the incubators and throw them on the floor to freeze to death. Nahariya's testimony helped sway the American public opinion in favour of the military force against Iraq. However, it was discovered 2 years later that Nahariya's story wasn't true, and that the CIA had not only paid her to lie, but also responsible for the mass marketing of her testimony. In 1992, John MacArthur of the New York Times uncovered Nahariya as the daughter of the Kuwaiti ambassador to the US. and that the CIA had used her to assist in waging war with Iraq for the purposes, of course, for the oil. The CIA paid Naraya for her fabricated testimony and even paid for her to attend acting classes to appear convincing. It worked, of course, because in January 1991, the US landed a military operation against Iraq known as Operation Desert Storm. And we can certainly say that a lot of the problems that we now face today with people like Daesh is down at least partly to this Desert Storm operation that destabilised the whole area of the Middle East. So, but yeah, it was one of those things. We have obviously the stories of weapons of mass destruction, which was kind of how it was sold to the British public, which of course don't appear to have existed either. Although the information towards them, again, is a bit patchy because it was based on a study carried out on the Iraqis' military strength, but that was done more than 10 years before it was claimed to have been done for the start of the Gulf War. So again, we were definitely also misled to some degree, but we weren't outright lied to the way the Americans were, but we were misled because the study itself was actually part of a PhD dissertation carried out 10 years before it was claimed to have been. So well, we were kind of lied to as well, really, yes.
Going back to what when you were talking about the Vietnam there, Richard Clemens says the Americans were just looking for the reason to put boots on the ground. Reminds me a bit of the weapons of mass destruction episode.
Exactly, I was just saying. It says that was the way they sold it to us was effectively these WMDs. And I very much remember Blair talking with great passion about these WMDs that just did not exist. So.
Okay. So we got on to number 6.
Mm-hmm.
Where is number 6 going?
Operation... Sorry, so I was waiting for you to read it out because I interrupted last time.
Sorry, Operation Mockingbird, US government media control.
Mm-hmm. This, of course, is something that people would say is going on right as we speak. Whether there is or isn't is something we can debate, but it's certainly in the late 1940s, as a Cold War was getting underway, the CIA launched a top-secret project called Operation Mockingbird. Their goal was to buy influence and control among the major media outlets. They also planned to put journalists and reporters directly in the CIA payroll, with some claim that is ongoing still to this day, as we know. The architects of this plan were Frank Wisner, Alan Dulles, Richard Helms, and Philip Graham, publisher of the Washington Post. So even from the beginning, there was actually press involvement from day one. They all planned to enlist American news organizations and journalists to basically become spies and propagandists. Their list of entrenched agents eventually included journalists from ABC, NBC, CBS, Time, Newsweek, Associated Press, United Press International, writers, Hearst newspapers, Crypt Howard, Copley News Service. So pretty much everybody, basically.
Yeah.
In the 1950s, the CIA had infiltrated the nation's businesses, media, universities with tens of thousands of on-call operatives. Fortunately, of course, we really can believe this next line, our media is no longer lured by corporations and governments to disseminate propaganda and disinformation. There is a word I could say for that, but this is too early in the evening. But no, I don't agree at all. I do think that kind of thing goes on.
Yes, we've still got a couple of minutes to go past the watershed.
Absolutely, yes. Baloney, I think is the word I'm looking for.
Yeah.
I don't think it's as blatant.
It wasn't the one I was thinking of, but
yeah, not me actually. But I thought I'll temper it. I don't think it's as blatant as it was in those days. I mean, the propagandist machines. The fact of the matter is, the American government learned how to do this from the Nazis. They were brilliant propagandists. And they were able to twist everything to their own advantage. I don't think it goes on because I think partly because we're too cynical now. We're saying, yeah, of course we believe that story. So it's almost like they try and force upon us ridiculous stories. We're just too questioning and cynical these days. But no, I do definitely think our media does get influenced and manipulated. And of course, the Gulf War thing I'm reading above there in 1990 was exactly that. The CIA attempted to manipulate us via the media.
I think you're right to a point. Some of us are a bit more questioning, but I think the British public in general are dumb enough to believe mainly stuff because they kind of trust where it's coming from. They believe,
Yeah.
They could be being fed anything, but because they believe the source of where it's coming from, they tend to go with it.
Unfortunately, in other ways, it's even more sinister than it was in those days because it's so under the surface. It's very much, it's much more intelligently manipulated, shall we say. Certainly, if you follow some of the more sort of right-of-centre media over here, you'd think we were absolutely being invaded by Muslim terrorists and Muslims in general that are taking over the country. I've got a few friends over in the States, some of which, shall we say, have more right-wing leanings, partly because they're just in rooms, which unfortunately these things tend to get a little hand in hand. But one guy I talk to quite often, actually, he quite likes the fact that I kind of point out some of the things that are a bit absurd that come out from American media sources about our country, about the UK. Things like so-called no-go areas. Now, I used to live in the East End of London. I mean, probably the most immigrant intense parts of the whole UK, and yet there was no areas I felt even unsafe in. I felt perfectly fine. I mean, it's all about perception. I felt safer walking around parts of the East End than I do walking around my hometown at night, and that's for certain, and it's all white Europeans here. Yes, so there is a perception that is put out to us that's not as in your face, but it's drip feeding us to have certain ideas and views. I mean, as we were saying before offline about the whole business with the European Union, the way in which a lot of those that want us to pull out of the Union are much more engaged in what you might call scare tactics about what might happen if we stay in the EU.
I think the word you were actually looking for was not dumb, it was more gullible.
They were gullible in those days.
They still are.
Gullible, not dumb.
No, they trust where it's coming from because it's the British, it's the government.
Yeah.
So they're telling us, so it must be true.
Yeah.
What's a load of rubbish.
We are gullible in believing what's in the media, I must admit.
Richard Clemens said you forgot to mention the news of the world, Andy.
Well, God, don't go down that road.
And just to make a point here that it does still happen in this country, you've only got to look back to the last British election. The general press and the BBC in particular were very biased towards the Conservative Party.
Oh, absolutely. Our media itself has undoubtedly got a right-wing bias. There's no escaping that at all.
I mean, you only had to look at the so-called questioning on the debates. I mean, Cameron got away with murder.
Unfortunately...
to my mind, he never actually answered one question.
Oh, absolutely.
And yet everybody else got hammered.
Absolutely. I mean, particularly, I'm a Labour supporter, but I've never been a fan. Never was a fan of Ed Miliband. I think he was extremely weak, but unfortunately, he fell into their trap. Some of the questioning, the lines that I saw being used were designed to trap him into saying rather silly things, and that's exactly what it did. I mean, it looked like he was inadequately prepared to answer questions, much less run the country. So I do think there is a bias in our media, partly because historically speaking, the Conservative governments have been less intrusive into newspaper operations. If you think all the whole business about the press intrusion into the media, that was started under the last Labour government. They were the ones who began the investigations. The Tory government continued it, obviously, because it was already moving. But it was Labour who initiated, and I think historically speaking, Labour have been more not been as willing to allow the media here to be free to express itself, is one way of putting it. And there's much greater scrutiny has come under the Labour governments previously. Things like Ofcom, Ofwatch, they all began by the Labour government at the time, whereas the Conservatives were actually opposed to these ideas. There's all the greater freedom of the press. So the press naturally tends to gravitate towards them because they, as a party, as a government, they give the press greater freedom.
Yeah, having said that, I do think the likes of Ofcom and stuff were needed at the time.
Absolutely.
I mean, there was no emphasis on what they were bringing out. They had to be able to prove it.
Absolutely.
And now to a point, despite the fact that the headlines are most of the time have nothing to do with the story, they have to prove to a point what they're actually printing.
Yeah, this is often the case as well.
Yeah, before they could print what the bleeding well liked.
Absolutely, and often that is the case. A number of times you'll see news stories, when you read the headline and then read the content of the story, they actually don't match up.
Yeah.
They are scare tactics particularly.
It is, and unfortunately, a lot of the British people these days don't actually read newspapers. They see the headlines in the supermarkets, but they don't actually bother to read them.
Right, can I interject here and just say about the next one? I'm a little bit concerned of where you're going to come from.
Oh, well, I see. Well, I wanted to try to make sure that it wasn't too American biased, this list. There were operations. I mean, I think what we can certainly say is things that happen in America tend to affect us directly very quickly, but I thought this was an important one. Number 5, the Hillsborough Stadium disaster. Now, this is the truth compared to the created story that the media, again, played its part in and the police were largely responsible for. Let me just read this to you. On April the 15th, 1989, 96 Liverpool fans were crushed to death and hundreds more injured when trying to watch the FA Cup semi-final at Sheffield Wednesday's Hillsborough Stadium. From the beginning, the police tried to blame what they described as drunk and frenzied Liverpool fans, a view that was supported by the UK media, especially the Sun newspaper.
Yeah, the Sun actually accused Liverpool supporters from robbing.
I'll get on to that. Don't say any more. I'm glad to get to that.
Don't say anymore.
The Sun accused the Liverpool fans, amongst other things, of pickpocketing injured fans, assaulting and urinating on the police, and attacking one police officer whilst trying to give a mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. But there were problems with this story, even though it went all over the world. So to the point that by 2011, a retired judge claimed the families of the dead should stop their, quote, conspiracy theories about what happened at the disaster. Despite this, the pressure to reinvestigate the events had grown to the point that a new inquiry was announced, and by 2012, the inquiry had shown conclusively that the police had made strenuous attempts to blame the tragedy of the 96 on the victims themselves for the crush. To date, the inquiry has shown that the police were inadequately prepared, made critical mistakes that substantially contributed to deaths and injuries of those involved, and made every effort to attempt to cover up their actions. And despite offering an unreserved apology, to this day, many Liverpool fans refuse to buy The Sun for its headlines on the day.
God.
Yep.
So there you go. It's a conspiracy of our own, unfortunately, that turned out to be absolutely true.
Yeah.
That the police tried to blame the crowds, when in actual fact the police were largely responsible. I mean, I know the number one feature that the police that was brought out was the pressure on the gates at the rear of the stadium, that the police, because they were worried about people being injured at the gates, opened the gates and allowed everybody in.
Yeah.
Forget the fact that, of course, everyone was then fenced into the ground itself. That was described as a critical decision and critically dangerous, and is the number one cause for the injuries people suffered. An already crowded stadium was crowded even further. The police should have never have opened those gates, should never given permission for those gates to be opened. They were underfunded. They were under police. There was not enough of them. It was just basically chaos. But of course, they wanted to keep their backs clean and try to blame the fans, which is absolutely ridiculous. And finally, as we know, they are fully now vindicated, and that the police constable head at the time has resigned, and the current head of the police at the time for Sheffield also resigned with these findings, even though he was not directly involved in any way, shape or form. He's taken the blame and taken the hit. So there we go.
I would just say it's not just Liverpool fans that refuse to buy the Sun. It's Liverpudlians in general.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Across the board.
Yeah.
And to be honest, I can't blame them.
No.
Well, no, it's just ridiculous. Those headlines are just unbelievable. They're absolutely cringeworthy. And they did make a full unreserved apology, but by then the damage is done. Even though we know full well now what really happened, or a much better idea of what happened, it's still a perception that exists for some.
Yeah.
Okay, right, well the next one. Operation Northwoods, US military had plans to false flag Cuban provocation, origin of the false flag idea.
Absolutely. I suspect this is exactly where the term false flag comes from. Conspiracy theory. The Joint Chiefs of Staff in the US military drew up and approved plans to create acts of terrorism on US soil in order to sway American public into supporting the war against Cuba. Fortunately, President Kennedy rejected the plan, which included innocent Americans being shot dead in the streets, boats carrying refugees fleeing Cuba to be sunk in the high seas, a wave of violent terrorism launched in Washington, D.C., Miami, and elsewhere, people being framed for bombings they did not commit, and planes being hijacked. In actual fact, you can now get hold of, through the American Freedom of Information Act, the letter that essentially starts the whole idea off. And I should actually read it aloud. Subject, justification for US military intervention in Cuba. Number 1, the Joint Chiefs of Staff have considered to the attached memorandum for the Chief of Operations Cuba Project, which is the name of the operation, well, one of the names of the operation anyway, which responds to a request that this office for a brief but precise description of pretexts which would provide justification for US military intervention in Cuba. The Joint Chiefs of Staff recommend the proposition memorandum be forwarded as a preliminary submission suitable for planning purposes. It is assumed that there will be a similar submission for other agencies, that these inputs will be used as the basis for developing a time-phased plan. Individual projects can be considered as a case-by-case basis. Further, it is assumed that the single agency will give primary responsibility for developing military and paramilitary aspects of the basic plan. It is recommended that this responsibility for both overt and covert military operations be assigned to the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And that's signed L.L. Emnitzer, the Joint Chief of Staff's chairman. So there you go. That was the actual letter that began the project. But perhaps most horrifyingly, the Lemnitzer planned for elaborate staged incidents whereby Cuban aircraft would attack and shoot down a plane full of college students. So that was the plan, to try and create in the public's mind the idea that we should go to war against Cuba or invade Cuba because of Castro's plans to cause mayhem across America. And it was all fake, false flag. And of course, this has become a very popular term for conspiracy theorists, for political conspiracies. Certainly the idea of operations being done in order to create an impression that we must act in certain ways. And that kind of ties in a bit with the thing we talked about the Gulf War before, about the fake testimony given. Now, of course, there are those that would include things like 9/11 as being false flag, and already even within hours, or within an hour or so of the Belgium incident last week, people were claiming that was false flag and not as advertised. We don't know. I mean, the fact that these projects did exist and were considered, although, as I say, Kennedy said no to this one, leads credence to the people who said that these things may well still be going on. But I hope not, but we can't really know. I mean, that's often the problem with conspiracies. It's always a bit of a vacuum. You know, we don't know for definite what's really happening. Therefore, you are open and free to speculate in whatever way you want to. So, what do you think, guys?
Yeah, I kind of agree. It's the moment you know they've done it before, it makes you question everything.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we can say for definite, here is an example where he got as far as the planning stage all the way to the president. Now, given what we do know about what happened with Kennedy, of course, which was only less than 18 months after this memorandum was written in 1962, that we also know that Kennedy himself gave instructions that the plans to invade Cuba post the Bay of Pigs in 1961, he gave very strong instructions that no such plan should continue, that there should be a halt called to all planning invasions of Cuba. We know that these operations continued. They are Operation Mongoose is very much the result of the scaling down of operations to invade Cuba. But yet, despite Kennedy's insistence that there should be no planning of invasion, the plans were still happening. So it's entirely possible that some of the things that were discussed in this operation, in Operation Northwood, did actually go ahead at a much lower level, a smaller scale. I mean, we know historically there was no mass attacks that took place in America in the early 1960s. The events I've outlined there, none of those things actually occurred. But we don't know what smaller scale things were being done to rally support for a Cuban invasion. So we don't know. So it's a very grey area. Unfortunately, America's history in the early 60s is very, very murky, to say the least.
I've just noticed something there from Tommy Martin. He said, thankfully the KTPF radio is free and always informative, unlike the role-play merchants of the UK UFO paranormal conferences that want to charge £30 a day for an event. Same old role-play faces and topics in what appears an exploitative arena. Well done, KTPF radio.
Oh, very nice.
Well, thank you very much for that. Richard Clement says, as David Icke would say, problem, reaction, solution.
The problem with David Icke is I think he tends... The problem with David Icke fundamentally is he creates the problem. He creates an idea of a problem and then finds a solution for a problem that he's effectively created. But that's another story. We won't go into that. Could be all night. But
okay.
Number 3.
Project MK Ultra sounds like a brand new car. CIA mind control problem.
Program.
The
CIA mind control program, indeed. Now the top 3 are ones that we know of, we've even talked about, but all 3 of these top 3 have had recent developments that make them interesting, which I'll talk about in a second. The conspiracy theory was that the CIA ran secret mind control experiments in the US citizens from the 1950s to 1973. And it's true. Excuse me. In 1995, President Clinton actually issued a formal apology on behalf of the US government. Essentially, the CIA used drugs, electronics, hypnosis, sensory deprivation, verbal and sexual abuse, torture to conduct experimental behavior engineering and experiments on subjects. The program was subcontracted hundreds of these projects over 80 different institutions, including universities, hospitals, prisons, and pharmaceutical companies. Most of it was uncovered in 1977 when the Freedom of Information Act exposed 20,000 previously classified documents and triggered a series of Senate hearings because the CIA Director Richard Helms had most of them. Because CIA Director Richard Helms had most of the more damning MK Ultra files destroyed in '73. So it makes you wonder, if they declassified 20,000 documents, how many did Helms have destroyed? Much of what actually occurred during these experiments still remains unknown, and of course not a single person was ever brought to justice for the entire thing. And so they are certainly responsible for these things. I know some of the things they tested were things like putting LSD in a water supply of a small town, which is what people on lots of nice trips for nothing else. And one particular story which I thought was amazing, I actually read about, was a way in which they attempted to use a cat that was laced, its fur was laced with some kind of doping agent, and then was set into, I think it was the Cuban embassy. I think it was a Cuban embassy. It was like a little party in the evening, and this cat was wandering around amongst the people at the party, and everyone who stroked the cat was then being infected through their skin by some kind of drug that was supposed to affect them. Apparently it didn't work at all, but that was one of the stories I read about, which I thought was quite funny.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard loads and loads of stories that on many occasions about the American troops when they went into Vietnam were actually given LSD.
Absolutely.
And in tablet form to take.
Again, he says, you were saying before, the Vietnam War was used as a way of testing all sorts of things, not just military plans and political theories, but also experimental weaponry and experimental drugs. Keep the soldiers going and fighting. But what's interesting, is there's growing evidence now that a chap by the name of Theodore, I can never pronounce this right, Kuznetsky, otherwise known as the Unabomber, was a subject of the MK Ultra project while he was at Harvard in the late 1950s. Now, if you don't know who the Unabomber is, he carried out a series of bombing attacks in America, domestic America, against American citizens for reasons that were never really clear, some kind of rather strange political agenda, but they're now saying that it's highly likely he was actually a subject in some of the MK Ultra experiments. So it does make you wonder if his mental state was brought on by MK Ultra experimentation. That's the more recent information about that one. So come on to number 2, which you've already mentioned, but we're going into a lot more detail now. Operation Paperclip.
Nazis into the USA.
As World War II was entering its final stages, American and British organizations teamed up to scour occupied Germany for as much military, scientific, and technological development research as they could uncover. Trailing behind the Allied combat troops, groups such as the Combined Intelligence Objective Subcommittee began confiscating war-related documents and materials and interrogating scientists as Germany's research facilities were seized by Allied forces. One enlightening discovery, recovered from a toilet in Bonn University, was the Osberg list, a catalogue of scientists and engineers who had been put to work for the Third Reich. In a covert affair originally dubbed Operation Overcast but later renamed Operation Paperclip, roughly 1,600 of these German scientists, along with their families, were brought to the United States to work on America's behalf during the Cold War. The program was run by the newly formed Joint Intelligence Operatives Agency, whose goal was to harness German intellectual resources to help develop America's arsenal of rockets and other biological and chemical weapons, and to ensure such covert information did not fall into the hands of the Soviet Union. Although he officially sanctioned the operation, President Henry Truman forbade the agency from recruiting any Nazi members or active Nazi supporters. Nevertheless, officials within the JIOA and Office of Strategic Services, the OSS, the forerunner of the CIA, bypassed this directive by eliminating or whitewashing incriminating evidence of possible war crimes from the scientists' records, believing their intelligence to be crucial to the country's post-war efforts. One of the most well-known recruits was Werner von Braun, the technical director of the Promenade Army Research Center in Germany, who was instrumental in developing the lethal V-2 rocket that devastated England during the war. Von Braun and other rocket scientists were brought to Fort Bliss, Texas, White Sands proving grounds, can't speak English now, New Mexico, which of course is not very far away from Roswell, as you were talking about earlier. Von Braun later became director of NASA's Marshall Space Flight Center and the chief architect of the Saturn V launch vehicle, which eventually propelled 24 American astronauts to the moon. Although defenders of the clandestine operation argue that the balance of power could have been shifted easily to the Soviet Union during the Cold War if these Nazi scientists were not brought to the United States, opponents point out the ethical cost of ignoring their abhorrent war crimes without punishment or accountability. So what do you think, guys? Pretty nasty stuff.
Just makes you think you can't bleed and trust the Yanks.
Absolutely not. Well, this is the stinger. This is the more recent information that's now come to light.
I will alter that slightly. You can't trust anything that comes via the CIA.
Well, absolutely.
Not the Americans in general.
Well, have you noticed how many of these stories the CIA's fingers are all over? But this is the nasty bit. This is what's come to light more recently. What makes this even more sinister that more recent evidence has come to light suggesting that an indeterminate number of scientists, in quotations, were actually SS officers with no real connection to scientific research. Realizing that the war was certainly lost and aware that the Americans were looking for these scientists, many SS officers faked IDs and papers claiming themselves to have be part of various Nazi wonder weapon research programs. As previously mentioned, since the records were whitewashed, there's no way of knowing exactly how many SS officers made their way to America's space and research programs under false pretenses. So that's really quite chilling, that there were people who had nothing to do with it, but because the Americans were more, and us, were more interested in getting their technology, that they didn't ask any questions about the history of these people and just took the papers at face value. Now, whether or not, of course, these guys then showed their lack of knowledge by being in space projects that didn't work out, or their fellow genuine scientists, Nazi sympathisers, kept quiet, which apparently is more likely, that they knew that some of the people they were working with had no knowledge of science, but yet covered up their lack of knowledge because they were Nazi sympathisers, is really rather chilling. So there you go. That's come to light more recently.
Okay.
The problem is, I'm pretty sure the powers that be knew. They knew what was happening. They're not stupid.
Yeah, someone hopes that they were still doing it for the right reasons, but I don't think they were the right reasons of what they were doing. So
no, there wasn't.
Okay, does that bring us lastly to number one?
It brings us to number one.
Watergate, 2-in-1.
Absolutely, the 2-in-1, the granddaddy of all conspiracies, the one that is absolutely out there and is probably one of the biggest that we can be absolutely sure was definitely the case. And essentially, it is two conspiracies in one, so that's why it's good number one, because you've got two elements to it. The origins of the Watergate break-in, which we'll go into a bit more detail in a moment, lay in the hostile politics of the 1960s, that murky period in American history again. By 1972, when Republican President Richard Nixon was running for re-election, the United States was embroiled in the Vietnam War and deeply divided internally. In such a harsh political climate, a forceful presidential campaign seemed essential to the president and some of his key advisors. Their aggressive tactics included what turned out to be illegal espionage. In 1972, as evidence would later show, members of the Nixon Committee to re-elect the president, known as CREEP, broke into the National Democratic headquarters and stole copies of top-secret documents and bugged the office's phones. That's the break-in itself. The wiretaps failed to work properly, however, and on June 17th, the group re-entered the building and were actually caught as prowlers. And as the prowlers were prepared to break into the offices to place a new microphone, a security guard noticed that the taped... it's not been well written, actually. Noticed that the building door locks had been taped over, and the guard called the police, who arrived just in time to catch the spies red-handed. It was not immediately clear that the burglars were connected to the president, though. Suspicions were raised that when the detectives found copies of the re-elect committee's White House phone number among the burglars' belongings. In August, Nixon gave a speech where he swore that his White House staff were not involved in the break-ins. Most voters believed him, and in November, the president was re-elected in a landslide. But this is the second conspiracy. The first one was the break-in, now the cover-up. It later came to light that Nixon was not being truthful. A few days after the break-in, for instance, he arranged to provide hundreds of thousands of dollars in hush money to the burglars. Then he and his advisors hatched a plan to instruct the Central Intelligence Agency, there they go again, to impede the FBI's investigation of the crime. Now, there's always been a long-standing rivalry between the CIA and the FBI, so of course you could guarantee the CIA would certainly help out in anything to impede the FBI. This was a more serious crime than the break-in. It was an abuse of presidential power and a deliberate obstruction of justice. Meanwhile, the 7 conspirators were indicted on charges related to the Watergate affair. An urging of Nixon's aides, the 5 pleaded guilty to avoid trial. The other 2 were convicted in January 1973. By that time, a growing handful of people, including the Washington Post's Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein, very famously now, of course, and trial Judge John J. Sirica and members of the Senate Investigation Committee had begun to suspect there was a larger scheme afoot. At the same time, some of the conspirators began to crack under the pressure of the cover-up. Some of Nixon's aides, including the White House counsel John Dean, testified before a grand jury about the president's crimes. They also testified that Nixon had secretly taped every conversation that took place in the White House in the Oval Office. If prosecutors could get their hands on those tapes, they would have proof of the president's guilt. Nixon struggled to protect the tapes during the summer and fall of 1973. His lawyers argued that the president's executive privileges allowed him to keep the tapes to himself, but Sirica, the Senate committee, and the independent research prosecutor named Archibald Cox were all determined to obtain them. When Cox refused to stop demanding the tapes, Nixon ordered that he be fired, leading several Justice Department officials to resign in protest. These events took place on the 20th of October 1973. It was known as the Saturday Night Massacre. Eventually, Nixon agreed to surrender some, but not all, of the tapes. In early 1974, the cover-up began to fall apart. On March 1st, a grand jury even, appointed by a new special prosecutor, indicted 7 of Nixon's former aides on various charges related to the Watergate affair. The jury, unsure if they could indict a sitting president, called Nixon an unindicted co-conspirator. In July, the Supreme Court ordered Nixon turn over all the tapes while the president dragged his feet. The House of Representatives voted to impeach him for obstruction of justice, abuse of power, criminal cover-up, and several violations of the Constitution. Finally, on the 5th of August, Nixon released the tapes which proved undeniable evidence of his complicity in the Watergate crimes. In the face of complete and certain impeachment by the Senate, the president resigned on August the 8th. 6 weeks after, the new president, Gerald Ford, was sworn in. He pardoned Nixon for any crime they committed while in office. Some of Nixon's aides were not so lucky. They were convicted of very serious offences and sent to federal prison. Nixon himself never admitted to any criminal wrongdoing, although he did acknowledge using poor judgment. Yeah. His abuse of presidential power had a negative effect on American political life, creating an atmosphere of cynicism and distrust. While many Americans were left deeply dismayed by the outcome of the Vietnam War, Watergate added further disappointment to a national climate already soured by the difficulties and losses of the past decade. So there we go, chaps. That's number 1, the biggest of them all in many respects, brought down a president, and this probably is the number 1 reason why we are so cynical and distrusting of governments, not just Americans, of course, over here too, because he was incredibly popular. He was thought to be a very good president and was leading the country in the right direction. And when all this came out of the criminal activity, the cover-ups and conspiracies, it was just absolute shocking. You know, it's we all remember how shocked we were when 9/11 happened, but you know, even that was, you know, wasn't as big a scale in terms of the effect on the American psyche as the revelation of Nixon's criminality and the Watergate scandal. So yeah, that's why it's number 1.
Yeah. Can I say at this point we have, to an extent, bashed the press here and abroad, but that particular scandal would never have come out if it hadn't been for 2 really good journalists who stood by their guns, put themselves at considerably risk, and pushed ahead with what they thought to be and turned out to be the truth.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the thing. Woodward and Bernstein, they doggedly kept going, even though the offices of their own newspaper whilst not in favour of Nixon, were rather concerned of which direction this was going, and were concerned about the effect it would have on the mass media and the media's perception of the government. But yet they kept going, and the evidence was building up and building up. So absolutely,
Definitely.
Do you want to read that out from Tommy Martin there?
I don't know what you think to what Tommy's put, Andy.
just reading it a second. Actually, give me 2 seconds. Do you want to read it out?
Yeah, we'll read it out for our listeners.
Has anyone noticed that when a UK UFO documentary is on the horizon, all of the media-obsessed ufologists come out of the closet?
Oh, yes.
UFO conference season always attracts these role players, and ufology is now compromised by its lack of thoughtness. Any conspiracy will suffice, and everyone wants their own local Roswell incident for a podium speaker role.
I could say I could not agree more. Unfortunately, it is the case that when these sort of things start happening, there are people come out the woodwork. I mean, look at what we do. Almost every week I have a story from Scott C. Waring.
Yes.
It doesn't matter how ludicrous or out there or ridiculous, like the last one was clearly a light flare. He's still saying, it's aliens and UFOs. He's trying to keep his name in the media day after day. So no, I totally agree, Tommy. Absolutely agree.
Yeah, I mean, I have no doubt that something is happening.
Oh, absolutely.
Whether it be terrestrial craft or whatever, but stop posting lights from 2,000 yards away that we can't see jack about, and we got no definition about what's round it or anything, height, nothing, and say that's the spacecraft.
Yeah,
People,
absolutely.
it's not. It's lights in the sky.
Yeah.
At some point, it may be a spacecraft, but at the moment, until you can get a proper look at this thing, and maybe photograph it or whatever for somebody else to see, it's a light in the sky. It may be an unusual light in the sky, but that's what it is.
Yeah.
It's
Definitely.
UFO, not aliens. It's unidentified flying object.
Yes, absolutely. It's the thing in the sky. That's all it is at a particular moment in time.
It basically stands for, we don't know what the heck it is, but it's flying.
Yes.
It doesn't mean we're being invaded from Mars.
So.
Although, judging by all these things that are coming from Mars and that people keep seeing on the planet, they've already been here and gone back again and took stuff back with them.
Rant over. Well, thanks for that. Anyway, Andy,
or maybe they brought them to us in the first place. Who
Yes.
thank you for your top 10 conspiracies that were.
Indeed. I was just put, there was no, I mean, apart from the last three, I would have put those in that order. Just the others were just an order. But I also say the most recent thing again with Watergate is the fact that there's renewed pressure now that he has passed away some time ago, that there is this mysterious 20-minute gap in one of the most critical recordings made by Nixon himself in the Oval Office regarding what he knew about the activity of the Watergate burglars. There's this gap that exists that is thought to be that there was always backup recordings, and there's been a hunt recently to find the backup recording for those 20 minutes that are missing to see if there is anything on there. The other thing that's interesting is some of the names that came up earlier on, Hannah Dulles, etc., Lemnitzer, were involved in something that was recorded by Nixon discussing a number of occasions where he talked about secret and unknown elements of, quotes, the Bay of Pig event. Now, the interesting thing was pretty much everything is known about the Bay of Pigs, exactly what happened, why it went down, how it went down. And a lot of researchers have suggested that's actually references to the JFK assassination. That Nixon knew more than he was ever willing to let on about that, because obviously he was a senior politician at the time, and because of his own position, he may well have had seen as more sympathetic to the idea of, obviously, the invasion of Cuba, but also the idea of Kennedy being in the way of big business, which he was very much aligned with, whereas Kennedy was very much against. That he may well have been referencing the Kennedy assassination by using the Bay of Pigs reference instead, that these people were involved in the Bay of Pigs, and we don't want the stuff about the Bay of Pigs coming out in full public view. Well, everything was in full public view, so it's a bit of a funny one, a bit of a grey area.
Okay. Well, thank you for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it just goes to prove that the CIA will do whatever they think is right for them,
Oh,
for
absolutely.
them to keep the power where it needs to be kept.
Okay.
The same said previously, one of the things that Kennedy was very much had in motion was breaking up the CIA itself, was taking its power away and reassigning some of its sphere of influence to other agencies. So, of course, they had become absolute power to themselves by the 1960s, the CIA. They weren't directly answerable to anybody. And yet, the idea of a president trying to oppose them was, how dare you? You know, you're a transient president. You're around for 8 years at maximum. We've been running since the late 1930s. The original office began, which became the CIA eventually. How dare you question us? You know, we'll be around long after you.
Okay, right.
Just for those of you that don't realise, the CIA supposedly does not have a mandate to act on American soil. That's the FBI's job. CIA
absolutely.
is only supposed to deal with things in other countries, abroad.
Absolutely, yep, counterintelligence.
Counterintelligence. So that is their mandate, and unfortunately, that's why they don't like the FBI.
Absolutely.
Because they don't officially have the power to do anything in the United States. That, as we've seen tonight, doesn't stop them from doing it. Well,
There was actually, I forget.
should I say, should we heard tonight? That doesn't stop them from doing it.
I can't remember exactly which one it was, but a former head of the CIA actually said of J. Edgar Hoover and the FBI, they think they're in power in this country. We know we're in power in this country, and the president has no part in either.
Right, okay, well, that's that for tonight. That's that topic dealt with. Thank you very much, Andy.
You're trying to shut me up now, aren't you? I can see.
And now it's time for...
Impossible to do that, mate.
Right, just to let you know...
Trying to avoid this bit, but trying to keep you away from it, but no, I can't now.
Yeah, you can't, no. For those of you who are regulars to our show, and those that are on the radio replay on YouTube, last week we celebrated 4 years of the KTPF Community Talk Show. Steve and I started broadcasting on the 21st of March 2012 with our first guest and good friend Richard Freeman. In 2014 we changed to a Sunday, and after having the occasional guest co-host joining us in the hub, we decided to invite Andy Mercer on board as our regular co-host. During our time we have had some great conversations covering quite a few subjects with guests including Uri Geller, Richard Holland, Richard Felix, Ben Hansen, Eric von Daniken, Derek Acora, Nick Redfern, Larry Warren, Steve Mera. The list is endless. And to all who have given up their time for us, it has been very much appreciated. It's been great talking to our guests over the years and learning new things within the Fortean world. But after a long and careful consideration and discussion, Steve and I have decided it's time to hang up our mics with the KTPF. Okay, and we would like to thank all our listeners for tuning in and for supporting us over the years. But all is not lost.
No.
As I now hand you over to Andy.
Indeed. Yes, we have talked about this, guys, that Stevens has been doing this pretty much single-handedly for 3 of the 4 years, and I kind of came in and sort of got in the way, I think. It's probably a better way of putting me invited on. I sort of forced myself in. But they have had enough, and it's fair enough. It's not easy to put together a weekly show every week live. It takes an awful lot out. I mean, these guys aren't getting paid for this. They're not earning anything out of it. So it does take a lot of effort. But all is not completely lost. As I've announced a little while ago, I'm going to be starting my own little monthly show, only once a month. I can't do a whole night every week. I'll kill myself. But it's going to be on mysteries and conspiracies. So it's a little different to what we have here. My show is going to be about an hour long, and it's going to be pre-recorded, I'm afraid, because I don't want to use my Sunday evening every now and then, just on my lonesome. But it'll be discussing all sorts of topics to do with the conspiracies and mysteries, like the kind of things we've been talking about. I'm not necessarily going to wander too much into the realms of the paranormal, but I might occasionally. But the subjects are going to be various things from mysteries and conspiracies. Each week will be a particular topic, a particular event in the past that's been seen as a bit strange, and I'll just talk about it for about an hour or so, what's known about it, what it involved, what some of the theories are. It'll be broadcast on the third Sunday of every month, which is what we had been highlighting as being the KTPS monthly show, but as it's not going to happen now, I might as well use that slot, so it's already in people's minds that the third Sunday of the month is when we're going to be coming out. So my first solo show will be out on the third week in April, and that is to discuss what's known as the Dyatlov Pass incident. Now, I briefly mentioned this last week. It was in 1959 a group of very experienced Russian hitchhikers, they always call them hitchhikers, hikers and skiers, were travelling through part of the southern and central Ural Mountains when one night, for reasons that remain a complete mystery, they seemed to basically went mad. They cut their way out of their tent in the middle of the night and scattered out, barely clothed, some of them, and certainly not in clothes for minus 25 degrees. And some of them died of hypothermia, whilst others suffered very severe injuries, which have been likened to having been dropped from a great height or having been in severe car crashes. And yet they don't appear to have fallen from any height, and there were certainly no cars out there. The explanation for their injuries has ranged from things like being attacked by the abominable snowman to being attacked by Soviet military to being encountering UFOs and other such strange monsters. So that will be the subject of the first show, which will be going out in April. And as I say, it's a pre-record. It will be available as a podcast, and I'll put it on YouTube as well. But it will be broadcast live by Worsley Radio and its affiliated stations once a month. The second show is probably going to be about the supposed theory that Paul McCartney died in 1963, I think it is, which is an intriguing one, which I should be looking into. The one I can be definitely sure of is September show about 9/11, because it's September, of course, but beyond that, I don't know yet. But certainly the first one, which goes out in the third week of April, will be the Dyatlov Pass incident. Now, I will try to be in our chat room on the night of the show, so if people have questions, then they're more than welcome to put questions to be there in the chat room page. I'm also going to put together a Facebook page, which I'll advertise, hopefully, as well, so you can see on the old KTPF page, that will be for the Mysteries and Conspiracy show. So people can ask questions. I'll mention in advance what subjects I'm going to be talking about, and if questions come to me in advance, I can obviously discuss their questions. But that's the plan. It'll be once a month for about an hour, pre-recorded by me. Well, I'm going to use media clips that I found online talking about things like I've come across an excellent interview with Paul McCartney done by the Letterman show a few years back, where he's actually asked directly what he thinks about the theory that he is actually the replacement of the real Paul McCartney. And he actually gets quite funny towards the end, but it is interesting how even things like the American mainstream media have actually talked about this earlier, McCartney being dead. With the show that's coming up, I've talked to a Russian writer who's written about the Dyatlov Pass incident, and she has the advantage of speaking Russian, obviously, and was able to point out some of the mistakes that have been made by Western and English-speaking writers on the topic. I've also spoken to Richard Freeman, who you mentioned just a moment ago there, Sue, about the possibility of there being a crypto zoological creature involved in the incident, and I'll tell you what his thinking on that is. This is with his permission, of course. So that will be my first show in the third Sunday in April, the Dyatlov Pass incident in 1959. So there we go.
Okay. Well, thanks for that. I wish you all the best of luck with your new show, Andy.
Thank you.
And also, I just want to say thank you to Tommy Martin, who's put on there that he's sorry that the KTPF team are leaving and he's bloody sad here. Thank you for everything. I thank you as well, Tommy, for your support, as well as everybody else. And what's this? Although you very briefly, I've been listening to your show. It's been great fun, but I do understand that working on a show for as long as you guys have can be quite a challenge. All the best for the future, and I look forward to listening to Andy's show. That's what Richard Clement said. Tommy says good luck to everyone at the KPTS. We will miss you. You never know, we might come back. I might find that I miss it. We might find that we miss it, and we might decide to give it a rebirth later in the future. Yeah. You never know.
Either way, we definitely need a break.
we definitely need a break.
Which is fair enough. That's part of the reason why I'm going to do mine as well, that window isn't always open, that you can come back. And who knows, I might do a live show and get you in as my guests. I want to say, Sorry, go on.
The KTPF group page will be staying open, so that's not a problem.
Yeah,
And
I should be posting rubbish in there, don't we?
yeah, so that will be open. So if anything does decide to change, you will find out in there. So just keep an eye out. Also, even if you're new to the show, if you want to listen back to the last 4 years, some of the topics that we've had. If you're on our KTPF chat room page as we speak, if you look to the right of our website front page, it will say KTPF Extra Radio Replay. If you click on that, that will take you to our YouTube page, and you will find all past shows there that hopefully will take your fancy. We cover everything: cryptozoology, Jack the Ripper, UFOs, all sorts of things. So maybe catch up with some of them.
We had a good show with Andy doing the old Kennedy thing and all as well.
Yeah.
Oh God, yes.
JFK. So
You will find a few shows there where me and Andy are having a go at each other.
yeah.
Oh, that's good, yeah.
So
Part of the idea, there wasn't it, to have different perspectives. I don't think there's a topic we haven't talked about. That's the thing. I mean, if you think every week, pretty much for 4 years, you're talking about over 200 shows. That's an awful lot.
I think
of shows.
of all the shows we've done, the one I still can't get my head around are them silly soldiers.
Okay.
yeah, the Universal Soldiers.
Yeah,
It's a bit scary, really. Yeah.
It was a bit too much Hollywood for me. That.
Yeah, I like the one about human combustion.
It's something you've always been interested in.
I've always
isn't
been
it?
fascinated by that spontaneous human combustion. So but
do you want to put the link for Worsley, because Rich is asking how will we find Andy's show.
Oh yes, yeah, go for
I
it.
think we put the link up there for Worsley.
right, I'll do that for you.
Also via the KTPF
yeah.
page, which so you say will stay open. That's not going to close. And I'm able to post on there, so I'll post up the links to my show when it comes. I would say it'll be live, but also I'll be podcasting it through Spreaker and on YouTube. So because it's not live, it's easier to kind of do basically. But I'll make sure it's out there and readily available for everybody to have a listen to me ruffling.
What chat room are you going to use, Andy?
Hopefully this one, if I can get it to work properly.
What one?
The
This one.
KTPF.
Oh, the
Chat-
KTPF.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's all right. If I can get it to work properly,
I'll leave it on the front page.
Yeah.
So I'll do that. Let me just find what I'm looking for. Well, actually, what I'll do is
if we change the radio thing,
I'll change the radio thing.
so it links to Worsley. So when Andy's on, they can come to the same place to hear it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll sort something out about that and put it on the front page there and and it will still say KTPF chat room, but
and when Andy's not on, you'll be hearing music.
yeah.
That's fair enough.
Yeah. So
Also, the other thing I was going to say was, and it's just gone out my head. Damn. Lost it. It's gone. It's gone. I know what it was. It's gone.
so
My favourite shows, I think possibly Derek Acora might surprise
Derek
somebody.
Acora. Yeah, on both shows we've had people that change their mind about Derek.
I was very
change their
surprised
opinions.
Absolutely, I was very surprised how forthcoming and open he was with us that first time, especially when he talked very candidly about some of the things that had happened, particularly with that TV show he used to be involved and how he felt was a bit stitched up. I mean, I still say first of all he's a showman, definitely, but I was quite pleased to hear what he had to say. And Von Daniken for me as well was the one that was really. In fact, we got him on was really excellent. But as someone who first came into this kind of field, reading some of his early books, it was quite a nice thing to actually hear him speak.
Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing that was nice about the Von Daniken thing, apart from what the actual chat we had, was that we was able to have a member of our old member of our team actually come in and talk to him himself, and
Big fan.
He was a big fan of Van Daniken's.
Absolutely,
So
yes, that was nice for him.
So he was able to not only was he able to ask some questions himself, but we were able to put a smile on his face.
Yeah. So, guys, if you want to listen to Andy's show, you'll be able to get it via our website. What we'll do is we'll leave the KTPF chat room up, ready for you for a Sunday, for you to correspond with Andy when he's in the chat room, and we'll put a link. We'll put a picture up there, and for his shows, and then all you got to do is just click on it, and then the player will come up as normal. Okay.
Absolutely.
So
So I won't guarantee I'll be in the chat room every time the show's on, but I will do if I can. I'll be there. So
right, okay. And what I'll do is maybe sort something out. As I say, you can always ask questions, and he'll come back and have a look for them, and maybe you can find questions there as well. So
yeah, I mean that'll be the main plan. Is obviously the week before the week of the show, I will say what the next one's about. So you've got 4 weeks, effectively, to get any questions to me about the particular topic I'm going to be talking about. So that'll be via the KTBF Facebook page or my Facebook page, or I'll make sure something's in place. I mean, we've got a few weeks for the first one, and then I say it's only monthly, so there's plenty of time to get this all sorted out. But the other thing, obviously, I will mention that we haven't talked about is that the magazine, KTBF magazine, has been great fun to do, but as the show itself is coming to an end, I don't plan to do my own magazine on the conspiracy stuff because there's probably not enough to fill a magazine. So that will have had its run, I'm afraid, which is about a year's worth, which has been good fun. I've quite enjoyed doing that one. As I was talking to Sue earlier, I might do like a mini version, perhaps every 6 months, of the conspiracy version, and include a few extra bits of news stories and other bits and pieces. But as it current format of every sort of few months, and quite a large, usually 40 plus pages, that will come to an end for the time being. But it'll still be available via both issue as in download and to be able to be read online. So,
you can still get them on our menu bar, so they will still be there for you to view. Tommy, who knows, after recharging our batteries, we might decide to come back fitter and fresher.
To be honest, Tommy, I think they will. I can't see them being able to keep away completely. It's just been too much a big part of their life. But don't tell them I said that.
We hope you've enjoyed tonight's show, and as we have enjoyed your company as always, and would like to thank DM Radio and Worsley Radio for giving us the opportunity to broadcast our show on their stations.
Yeah, and obviously we would like to mention an old friend of ours who is no longer with us, Paul, who got us actually doing the radio show in the first place.
Yeah.
It was a case of, we'd like to do a show, and we thought he meant just do an interview, and he went, no, a show. But, I mean, we've been doing the KTPF now for nearly 9 years. And
not the show.
Not the whole thing. And if you go into the menus at the top, you will see get loads of information on stuff. But 4 years of the show, 9 years of actual KTPF. It's
trying to keep it friendly.
Trying to keep it friendly, trying to keep it going. We've had some great guests. We've met some good friends over that time.
Another one we've lost recently was Mark Rosley.
Yeah, another good friend of ours who recently passed.
Yeah, so...
it's been fun, but it's been very tiring.
It has been very tiring. So, but thank you, and thank you, Andy, for joining us and helping the show as well.
Absolutely loved it. As I say, it started for me just occasionally phoning in and saying what I thought about the last guest you had on, and sometimes a little critical, shall we say, but then saying, well, come on and do it yourself then. So, okay.
Part of me does feel sad that we're stopping, I must admit.
It also stopped you causing chaos in the chat room.
As I say, part of me is sad that we are actually stopping, but at the moment needs must, and personally and professionally.
Yeah, we've even friends of ours said when it gets to the point where you dread the day because the show's on.
Yeah.
There's absolutely no point.
Yeah, and it's affecting your health as well. It's time to stop.
So,
but we should, as you say, we will see what happens. But at the present time, it's over to Andy, and we will support him. I will listen into his shows, and if you guys have any ideas for shows for Andy, let him know.
Yeah, let him know.
I certainly will.
Yeah, you certainly will do. And whether I take your notice or not is another matter, but you certainly can do.
We don't normally anyway, so...
No, I've got a few ideas up my sleeve already, so, but obviously something that I haven't even thought about. You say, as long as it's a mystery or conspiracy on a specific event or experience rather than a kind of general discussion. That's the idea. I mean, obviously I will do some of the things because obviously I've spoken to Worsey Radio's Ray already, and some of the my show is going to be broadcast in Canada and the States as well, so I might go over things like the JFK assassination again, which we did before we hooked up with Worsey Radio, and obviously Jack the Ripper's another one, so I will do some of the old ones I've done before. In fact, the JFK one might become kind of a multi-episode one because there's so much to it, and I could talk for days about that. So
I
everyone's
do
got
actually
interesting.
have one for you, Andy.
Say again?
I do actually have one for you.
Oh yeah,
and it's actually in Russia again. It's the I can't remember what it was called, but it's where the meteor struck and took a large part of it of land out, and where the meteor landed, they've actually found diamonds and stuff underneath.
Oh right, I don't know about that. Send me a link to that information. I'll have a look.
I will see if I can find it, but I've come across it several times. It's basically a large meteor struck an area of Russia.
Oh right, I shall look into that. I will probably have, as we usually do, is a bit of our new stuff. Obviously, I'll be able to select the best stuff over a period of 3 or 4 weeks, as opposed to having to find something good every week. So that sort of thing I'll have feature as well as any particular strange or unusual mystery conspiracy related stories. Because one of the things we discovered is if you don't look for ghosts or UFOs, there isn't a lot really in terms of stories. It's sometimes hard to find something different. You might find maybe 1 or 2 a month that look particularly interesting, but so by doing it just monthly there, that makes that partly easier as well. But certainly unusual things
I found on a weekly thing going through it, I'd seen most of it.
Yeah.
They just keep giving you the same stuff back all the time. It's
unfortunately, they often get recycled.
Done it.
So, well, basically that's it. We've come to the end of tonight's show. This is the end of the end show, and for now anyway. And as I said before, I really, really do appreciate your support that everybody's given us listening in, whether it be live or via our YouTube listeners. I'd really like to thank you all from the bottom of our hearts, and thank you for showing your support and sticking with us. And I don't know what else to say.
It's farewell from the KTPF and hello from Andy's Conspiracies.
Yeah.
And please tune in, enjoy your show, and all I can say is try and keep the paranormal friendly, and it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from me.
But it's not goodbye from me.
So as always, all that's left to say is keep the paranormal
friendly.
Good night and God
Night,
bless.
guys.
This is where it's at.
From ghoulies and ghosties and long-legged beasties and things that go bump in the night, visit our ghost store, and next time you might be able to show what just gave you a fright.
So for all of your investigation needs, with over 100 products in stock waiting for dispatch within 24 hours, you need to visit theukghoststore.com.